I don't want to start an Airbnb and like making a revenue. I mean, you could do that, but also you could, I want to start a brand. I want to start a hospitality brand. And then things start rolling out differently because then you have some spaces or houses or apartments, but you have a template or you have a core where you're running things from. And that is reflected automatically outside of the logo, like goes into like that culture, goes into your website, goes into your newsletter.
It's a feeling.
Goes into how you speak to customers. And rapidly, it becomes more valuable than the actual spaces. And like your ADR and how like that in a specific apartment or space or cabin, the money that they're producing, all of a sudden your brand in a few years, it's worth more than that.
You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. All right, welcome back to another episode of Slick Talk, and I have the one and only Emily and Mauricio from Hinter on the podcast today. Welcome to the show, you two. I was so excited to have you on. How are we doing today?
Great. Thank you so much for having us, Will.
Of course. Well, Emily, I think it's only natural that I start with you. Out of the two of you, I got to hang out with you at the Unique Stays Retreat or Summit with Ben Wolf and Zach Boozy Cruz, and got to hear a little bit of your stories. So I'd love to kind of start there. Where does Hinter begin for you guys? And specifically, I think you kind of had the big idea for going big on the brand. So I'd love to know just kind of the starting point for you guys.
Yeah, well, I can't take credit for going big on the brand, that's for sure. Mauricio had the dream of Hinter even before we met, but he wasn't sure necessarily what he wanted to do with it. So essentially, I used to be a school teacher, and I was a teacher for 7 years in elementary schools. And then when I met Mauricio, he had been working in software and more on the business side of things. And he had already been traveling a lot to Norway for work. And therefore, he got inspired by the architecture. And I'm sure you'll talk about that a little bit more later. But when he saw what was going on there, he thought, I need to do something in Canada like this. And he started working with an architect and started creating what is now Hinter House. But you didn't really know what you wanted to do with it. You were like, I don't know, maybe I'll sell them as prefabs.
Yeah, I had no clue.
Yeah.
I was traveling a lot to Denmark and Norway.
Yeah.
And getting influenced by the design, philosophies, culture. But yeah, as Emily said, I had no clue what to do with it. It started as a personal project, building a cabin, to one day Emily saying, hey, why don't we rent these?
Yeah, because Mauricio also owned his own personal cabin before we met. And then when we did meet, we would spend every weekend there. And I would get so inspired. Like I would be sitting by the fire, like writing, I don't even know what, just like writing and looking at like hearing the birds chirping and looking around, seeing the water, seeing the mountains. I felt so inspired and I felt calmer. I felt like my anxiety levels went down. And that's when I had said to Mauricio, I said like, why don't we have more people experience this? And that's when we kind of figured, oh, okay, maybe that's what we can do with Hinter House and that cabin and any other cabins that would come into the brand.
Yeah, it was in a way, it started as a personal project, but then quickly turns into, how do you share this with people? Because this feels good. Yeah. And then
Mauricio, can I ask you what inspired you initially from the culture and the architecture when going to Norway? Like what was the thing that really stood out that you felt like really needed to be shared and brought back to Canada?
I think there's a few things. Minimalism, simplicity for things, less is more, a lot of love for craftsmanship, that luxury has a different connotation and meaning. And that created kind of like a big like impact or something in like my head of like, these people are doing things differently, and we are not seeing much of that in North America. So how do we bring, like, it was the lack of like having something very special to me, but sharing it with well, at the beginning, as Emily said, with like experiencing that closer to home, and then rapidly into how you share that with other people. But again, just to finish with that question, is just the simplicity of things. How do you, with less things, you give more space, if that makes sense, and a space of like mind too, you know,
space to think, to create, to innovate, and even to connect with others.
Yes.
Yeah. Less things provides more space to absorb the world around you, in a sense.
And that was, I think, I mean, it's still to this day the core of Hinter, which is everyone who we work with when it comes to furniture or experiences within the spaces, they're artists. And there's a whole story behind each person. Like, you know, from the guy that made the cabinets, so to the company that manufactures the coffee machines, there has to be, or like the lamps or the speakers that we use that are like manufactured in the 70s in Japan. Like there's a passion for art and the people behind it.
I love it. And for the listeners, I'm sure they're all wanting to know too, but what does Hinter mean for you guys, or what's the actual definition?
Yeah, so it comes from the term, I'm still a sucker for coffee table books. And back then, 6-7 years ago, there was this book that I stumbled upon. The name was Hinterland. And it had a bunch of like super cool, gorgeous cabins in the Nordics. And that name stuck with me. And then I looked online what the Hinterland means. And it's a German term that means the land behind. And the word hinter, it's behind or outside of, or hidden in the city. It has like different meanings depending on how you mix it up. And before Hinter existed, Hinter house existed, which was the hidden house or the house behind. And then from that point onwards, Hinter was born to expand Hinter into other spaces.
All right, Slick Talkers, sorry to interrupt. As you know, great partners at Minute have sponsored this episode. They sponsor the show. So every episode is filled with amazing minutes. No pun intended. So if you don't know who Minute is or what they do, we see that we have a lot of new Slick Talkers out there in the world. So one, thank you for tuning into the show. Every listen, every time you hit play means so much to me and to my team. So thank you. But if you are new, Minute is an amazing noise detection device. Not only do they measure noise decibel levels inside of your vacation homes or your hotels, they actually can detect smoke. Not only that, if you're an outdoor kind of a unique stay person, or just have an amazing outdoor amenities for your guests, from pools to hot tubs to cookout pads, all the stuff, they have an outdoor sensor that is specifically made for outdoor noise, because I didn't know this, but noise outside and noise inside actually makes a difference. So you don't have to worry about constantly making sure, are people partying at your place? Are the cleaners there? Or like whatever, kind of issue might happen, you can get that peace of mind with Minute at your side. So as you grow, Minute will grow with you. They have an amazing team of support, and they have an amazing technology from hardware and the software. When the two marry, it's just a beautiful combination. We use Minute in all of our vacation homes and hotels with our management company, and it's the best decision we've made, because we are so dispersed and we are so spread out that having Minute just is a necessity for our operations. So get with Minute, go to the link in the show notes, let them know that Will from Slick Talk sent you. They'll give you a sweet deal. And of course, you know the drill. We're back to the episode, and I hope you enjoy. I love it. I love it. It's super cool. I always love asking people the definition and meaning of stuff, because sometimes it could have something as unique and profound as that, but then also it could be just something very special that happened to them and kind of just was a word. But I would love to know, you guys, specifically talk about, observing the world around you through this brand and having less is more. Do you think this is going to be like a maybe contradicting question, but do you think our industry is maybe full of noise when it comes to the actual property and design, or do you think there's not enough noise when it comes to the actual intentionality of creating a space so unique where people can truly unplug? I'm very curious on maybe where better way to phrase the question would be to the trend of less, right? Do you think this is going to be continuous?
Okay, so just to clarify, you're asking if you think this is becoming almost too trendy of like just this idea of minimalism rather than is it actually like something that we believe should be like stood by? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, maybe not trendy, but just in the terms of like, do you think this is something it's sustainable? Like how can more brands incorporate something like this within their own kind of setup and structure, whether they're uniquely designed specifically to be like this, or they want to start implementing that? Because I know from my own personal experience that I feel like I have a lot of noise in my life, right? So having anything that I can go to that's peaceful and quiet and disconnecting, but yet connecting at the same time, it's a rare moment to find. And so I'm wondering if you think it's, sustainable for brands more specifically in our industry.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that look, there's all different looks with different brands. There's all different vibes. Some beautiful short-term rentals are going to have they're not going to have a Scandinavian feeling. Maybe they'll have like an old English kind of feeling. And there's room for all of the different styles. I think when it comes to quiet and slow and intentional, I think that can be applied anywhere to any style. And I don't think that will ever go out of style. I think that, brutalism, minimalism, maximalism, all those things come in and out and flow. And it's also a matter of taste. And people will have their own opinions on that. And that is great because we all are different and we need that. But when it comes to slowing down and living intentionally and noticing the world around you, noticing nature, being in touch with yourself, with others, with the environment, all of those values that I do believe Hinter encompasses, I don't think those ever goes out of style. And I think that any brand can partake in that for sure. I think that it's about also guiding your guests in the sense of how to experience the space that you run in the way that you feel would be like the most ideal way. For example, like we have playlists. So when you check in, like first thing, a few hours after check-in, we send over a message saying like how to dim the lights. And here's a playlist that we recommend for the first evening. And we call it kind of like the perfect recipe our recipe for the perfect first evening at a Hinter space. And we give all those suggestions. So I think it's about setting your guests up for a way to really connect with themselves, disconnect, quiet down, and get in touch with the space they're in.
Right. I think it's also, if you think about it, it's a large cultural shift, especially in the West, that has been happening for the past 10, 15 years. I could be wrong. On slowing down or taking things easier. I think, especially in the West, especially in North America, we've come from a structure that big is better, faster is better. And I think as a society, we're starting to get tired of that, like literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
And we're starting to actually, hey, like other cultures have been doing something different and they seem to be happier, and like sometimes I think that, as Emily said, like there's like different ideologies and like different concepts, but like definitely one that is taking a lot of like traction and piquing a lot of interest. It's just the fact of slowing down and less is more and simplifying things. Mm-hmm. And I think that translates in hospitality with what we've seen with offering experiences. And Hinter might offer a certain experience, but like these things that we're seeing, which is amazing when it comes to hospitality, especially with like the upcoming of like short-term rentals where people are able to jump into hospitality way easier than it was like 20 years ago. We've seen like a bunch of like people creating their own versions of this or like experiences or themes. So I don't think it's going anywhere. I think if anything, is just has been amplified by the technology and the platforms that we have access to in the past 10 years.
Can I ask you guys a personal question? When you're feeling maybe a little bit more stressed out, fast paced, feeling like everything just needs to be moving, going, how long does it usually take you for, a weekend or however long that you take away to actually settle down and feel less of that? How long does it take you to actually settle in?
Good question, because I need more of that. It's so tough.
Honestly, I mean, look, we also have a baby, so throw that in too.
Yeah.
But honestly, I find that even if we go to our own property, okay, which is not fully a vacation, because then you're like, wait, we have to do that, there's things that come up. But as soon as we step into Hinter House, for example, like I feel instantly calmer, honestly. It's because you just see nature everywhere. And for me, nature is like by far the biggest healer, and it just calms me and it grounds me. And, right now we're in Spain while we're recording this. And like the second that I saw the ocean or the sea, the Mediterranean, I just like laid eyes on it, didn't even touch it, didn't even go into it. Just seeing it, I felt immediately like I'm on vacation, even though we're not fully on vacation, but like I am experiencing something else right now. And sometimes it's like the novelty effect of like just going somewhere new or a change of pace, like not being home in your own apartment or house is just like such a game changer because it refreshes your mind.
Yeah, but and I think everyone has their own required dose for like disconnecting. And I mean, you can do a 10-minute meditation and just like be somewhere else. You can go for like a 45-minute hike, and it does change the way you feel. I personally find that whenever traveling, either to a Hinter space or like any beautiful location, 3 or 4 days kind of like do something into the brain, kind of like, okay, just kind of like change, gear me down, a little bit. So yeah, I need 3-4 nights, man.
3 or 4 nights is a good answer. I would say the same. I do love the examples that you brought up though, Emily, like in the sense of the playlists. And I think you guys, from getting to hear your story and then talk to you before this recording, I kind of consider you guys masters of curation. So what's the number one thing that any short-term rental, or let's actually ignore short-term rentals, any hospitality entrepreneur or operator, whether it's a hotel, a landscape hotel, a short-term rental home, or a property management company, what are some things that operators can do today that actually better curates their space or curates the experience that their guests are going to have when they're staying at a property, whether it's a hotel or a home?
I would think that you have to consider the 5 senses in some way. You don't have to hit all of them, but a couple of them. So it's not just about what you see. And yes, that's important. And it usually is the first impression immediately. Like, what do you lay your eyes on when you get there? That's really important. In our case, I would say it's the architecture. That's the first thing you notice. And then after that, it's the design once you step in the door. But we have people sometimes asking, like, what do you use for that scent? I smell something amazing when I walk in. And, we have like, let's say a specific room spray that goes. It's not like a random one. It's like with cedar, because the house is made with cedar. So we really play into the actual natural landscape and materials of the space. Plus, and combined with things that just smell like nature. So that's always great. And then nature itself just smells good too. Pine trees smell amazing. So right there you have scent. And then that's when we come up with the playlists. That's why we did that, because we wanted to have that sense of sound. We wanted not only, of course, if you just slide open those doors and listen to the birds chirping or the leaves rustling in the wind, that's amazing too. But sometimes you also just want to hear some music. And what kind of music? Not just any music. We really curated what we feel goes with the space. Our night playlist was created at Hinter House at night. Our morning playlist was created at Hinter House in the morning. It's all done with extreme intentionality. Taste, we even have coffee and tea that we source from, not ourselves, but we source from local providers. The coffee is from a place in Montreal and they source it from South America. And then the tea is from a place in Brooklyn and their teas are sourced, I think, in a variety of places, but they're all sustainably sourced. So we have that, so that's something that you're tasting probably on your first morning with our morning playlist. So, and then of course, touch. I mean, you have all the textures in the space, the fabrics, like Mauricio said earlier, you know, we source all of our furniture from artists. We'll have like curators who find these pieces sometimes from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, vintage pieces from the Nordics, from Japan. Not all of our pieces are vintage pieces, but some of them are. And if they're not, we really, really try hard to find textiles that feel good and are sustainably sourced as well.
And I think to generalize, and I think for any hospitality brand or for any STR, I think that the core or like the most important thing comes down to be different or create something that nobody has done before. And it can be small things that people have done. But I think the magic happens when you start stacking them up and you create your own version of it. And once you do that and you figure out what kind of like set of different experiences you want to bring in, then you create your own brand. And that's the powerful part, right? Like when you start actually bringing different aspects. Also, another thing that we're like naturally obsessed with is doing something that people haven't done yet. Or like what's happening right now in the industry? How do we make it better? Like what hasn't been done?
Or even if it's not better, how do we make it hinter? Like how do we do the hinter?
Yeah.
Right? Because I think like someone else listening who has their own business as well, like they can say, okay, how do I take the playlist concept and apply it to my business? Or, you know, at the Unique Stays Summit, I believe it was Travis, he had mentioned at Outpost X, like he does a podcast as you're driving up. Listening to a podcast. Like we've talked about it. We're like, we should do something like that. And we would make it hinter. It wouldn't be like Travis's. It would be very Emily and Mauricio style or hinter style, you know? So I think that we can all learn from each other and we can all apply it to the way that that feels on track with our brands.
Mm-hmm. Well, you talked about two things there. One about the brand, which I think is super interesting in our space, right? Like a lot of people have logos, but I don't feel like a lot of operators have brands, where to you guys, you've mastered, I think, the brand, right? Like how do we make it hinter? But then you also have a unique piece about culture and community, where I've said, so when I came from the hotel world, I was a front desk agent at an autograph collection in Marriott. And I just remember being like, man, like we're missing out on so much within the 5 blocks around us, right? Like we have a Starbucks in our lobby when in reality, we had a really good coffee roaster just down the road. And, you know, we never implemented a lot of the uniqueness around us. You guys have done the opposite, where you've actually made some of your hinter homes an actual showcase of artists and, you know, craftsmen that have designed the furniture or whatever it may have been. So I think you've done two really good things. What pieces of advice do you have for those who actually want to incorporate brand without just being a logo, but then also have culture, you know, kind of impacting their community outside of just saying, we're awesome, here's our amazing designs, blah, 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 or whatever it may be. You guys actually live it through the actual artists that get to, you know, participate in your space. So I'd love to maybe have you just share some light on that.
I think it starts with, I don't want to start short-term rental, I want to start a brand. I don't want to start an Airbnb and like making a revenue. I mean, you could do that, but also you could, I want to start a brand. I want to start a hospitality brand. And then things start rolling out differently, because then you have some spaces or houses or apartments, but you have a template or you have a core where you're running things from. And that is reflected automatically outside of the logo, like goes into like that culture, goes into your website, goes into your newsletter.
It's a feeling.
Goes into how you speak to customers. And rapidly, it becomes more valuable than the actual spaces. And like your ADR and how like that in a specific apartment or space or cabin, the money that they're producing, all of a sudden your brand in a few years, it's worth more than that. So it's very interesting on that end.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, in terms of, I don't know if you also wanted to mention about like the cultural aspect. Yeah, I think that my advice to other brands that are looking to try to make it more intentional with the community and the culture aspect would be like, who's in your area? You know, what's around your space? Is there a cafe? Is there a restaurant? Is there a small shop, a gallery? Is there like a farm, like a farmer's market, or let's say, I don't know, someone who forages mushrooms, whatever it is. There's like really depending also on where you're located on this planet. You know, there's so many amazing things that could be going on. And I think it's to get in touch with those people and hear their stories. And I mean, the amount of times we went and like spent hours meeting people, talking to them, listening to their stories and understanding who they are, why they're doing what they're doing. And sometimes it's not like we put it on our website necessarily, but then we'll go and we'll share with our guests. We have like a little website where once you book, you get access to this kind of like a guest page, and there's suggestions, places to go, things to see. And so sometimes like they'll be featured there. And so it's not maybe in your face when you first see Hinter, but it's kind of further on in the journey. Once you are a guest and you're already have an upcoming stay, you can then see like, okay, I can go to forage mushrooms, or I can go and taste some tea from, you know, a tea house, whatever it might be. So I think that is a huge thing as well. And it's really just like,
yeah. And a part of that is also, there's a big component, which is education. Like, and how you can pass along that through a brand, right? So in our case, it could be like design or slow living, because that's our theme. But if you think about it, you can have like any theme that you're running on STR or like a hospitality brand. And let's say that you're building cabins that are close from like lakes, and your thing is going fishing. Like interviewing people that have been fishing for like 20, 30 years around the area, and doing kind of like a little podcast that you can share with your guests, or little articles that you can write about, or photographers that have been in the area for years, and then share that with your guests. All of a sudden, you're building brand, and you're building something that when people go, oh, I just didn't rent a cabin, I rented education, I rented a portal
a lifestyle
that gets me a little bit deeper into this particular theme. So it's just like going deeper than just the transaction of the space, right? I think that's where brand starts appearing or showing up.
And I think it lingers. Like, I think you leave the space as a guest kind of being like, okay, whoa, something happened. Like, something happened to me, you know, and you kind of almost leave feeling different, feeling changed. And I think that to me is like the best thing I could possibly hear, is when a guest leaves and says like, I feel so like I feel refreshed, or I feel like new, you know. I think that is really special, and that's what we hope for, that like you leave your experience with something, and anyone trying to do the same, I think that is kind of the goal in a sense, like leave with a piece of new knowledge or new experience, new feelings.
All right, I'm back. Sorry to interrupt, but you have to hear about our partners and friends at Hostfully. Not only are they an amazing property management software, they're an amazing team. I've been friends and partners with Hostfully for over 4 years now, and it's been an amazing 4 years. I can't complain, because as I continue to grow my business with our property management company, they continue to update and grow their products and features within the Hostfully platform, and it just gets better over time. So with us, we have a unified inbox, we have amazing marketplace, not only for the rest of our tech stack to integrate, which is awesome because they work with so many people, but then the third piece is the distribution is built in. So you don't have to fully rely on a channel manager. You can actually rely on the amazing integrations that Hostfully has with Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, Marriott, Homes and Villas, you name it. They have what you need in order to get your inventory, your properties to the right people. So it's kind of a no-brainer, but I'm going to tell you this anyways. You're going to get a special deal with Hostfully with the link in the show notes. You'll just have to let them know if you love the product, and then just tell them that we'll send you. So that way you can get that amazing Slick Talk deal. And of course, we're back to the episode. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoy.
I love all of that. That got me so excited.
Because I think it's, when I'm listening to other operators who are just getting started, or even like when we started our own property management company, I want to ask you this question is like, did you ever have trouble finding where to start, like with your community, like incorporating something simple as like coffee or art or a photograph or whatever it may have been? Because I think sometimes, again, even with operators like that want to be creative and create a brand, I think we can kind of forget like, okay, where do I even begin, right? Like there's already so much on your plate. Did you guys ever have any issues trying to figure out like how to start involving the community into the Hinter brand?
I think the main thing is we didn't try to do it all at once. We let things organically happen as well. Like we started somewhere. I think it was kind of like, oh, we like this place. Like it started with like a restaurant we used to go to ourselves, and we really liked it. Like at Milk.
Does it involve a wine glass every time you leave?
Just kidding.
I told you about that. Yeah. You're outing us. No, not there. That was a place in Montreal. But yeah.
All of that.
Don't steal. No. But no, there's a place actually near Hinter House that we would go since we met. It was it's like a little pasta place. And it started so simple. It was like we loved it. So we would tell our guests, hey, you should go there. And then we spoke to the owner and we said, hey, do you want to extend a little discount to them? And they said, sure, we'll give 10% or 15%. Now I don't remember what it is because it's changed a few times, but it started with that. And then it just kind of, we piled it on. And then we made it a little more less Emily and Mauricio. And we made it a little more Hinter. So we started to refine it a little bit of like, okay, it can't only be our favorites. It also has to really like tell a story and kind of feel like the Hinter experience.
And I think it's important to, when you start, you have your I mean, it's a little bit redundant or overdone, but it's valuable. It's like your purpose, your vision, your core values. Like, why are you doing this? Because I think once you have like those like 2-3 pillars or words, they can trickle down from there, right? Like that's where like the whole thing starts. And throughout the years, you keep adding on to that. For us was design, was minimalism, was slowing down. But then you're just like, oh, how do you slow down coffee? Oh, let's get like pour over experiences instead of actually just like Nespresso machines. And that doesn't mean like one is better for the other. It's just for the brand and what we're trying to do. That goes with the culture. And then it just goes again. But like you have that base, that template, and then you could just start building on top of it.
And to top that off, I think that once you get started, people see what you're doing, right? They start to know who you are as a brand, and then they reach out to you. And then all of a sudden you have so much that's come to you, and you filter through in a sense of like, what is important to you? And so, you know, even almost 6 years in, like we recently just found a new artist who's out in BC, and she's like an amazing painter, and she does abstract work, and we're getting prints made and to put in all of our spaces. She came to visit, she stayed in all of our spaces, she got inspired by them, and then she created a piece that was inspired by her stay. So like that wouldn't have happened 6 years ago. I mean, she wouldn't have thought of us and reached out to us, or vice versa, you know. And so it's a lot of it happens, I think, with time organically as well. And I think also I would say as advice is like not to say yes to everything just because you want, like, you know, to suggest things to your guests. I think it really has to feel like a meaningful partnership, or whether it's, you know, art to put in your space or a cafe to recommend. It all should feel like genuine and authentic to the brand you've created.
Well, you said something a little bit just there in the sense of taking a cafe or a pasta place and making it not so Emily and Mauricio, but more Hinter. So what are the big differences between the two? Does Hinter not have a lot of Emily and Mauricio in it already? Or do you guys have distinct features or characteristics that you like to separate the brand from your own personalities?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the core of Hinter's personality, it's a bit more Mauricio's personality, except there's certain things. Okay, no, you know what? I didn't introduce you. Okay, so I would say like you are a little bit more like I think I'm very chatty. I'm very chatty. I talk a lot. Like that's how I'm known to be a chatty person. I don't picture Hinter as chatty. You know what I mean? Like it's like cool, calm, and collected. And like he's cool, calm, and collected. I'm not so cool, calm, and collected. So I think in that sense, it's more him. But then I think it's more me when it's like slowing down, meditating, like grounding in nature, like a little bit more of like the earthy, like woo-woo side. I think that you are a little more like I used to be, but I kind of with age have become less of like you like to like be more like you go out more and like you like to see like you're more of like a social. Well, I'm social too, but in a different way. You like to go out at night. I like to go drink.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like whatever brand you create, it will have parts of you, but it's
not you.
It also becomes an entity of its own, and it's just like you keep feeding that entity, but it is kind of like you're a kid, huh?
Yeah, and
It's like
we have one of those too. So like, yeah, it's a good explanation. And I think like you are not your brand and it is not entirely you. But once you create the brand, you also start to become more like your brand because it becomes something so central to everything you think about and you very much believe in it. So you also grow to become more like it. If that
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And sometimes there's times that I should be more like Hinter because I'm freaking stressed and running around.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm just like doing and creating this brand that tells people to slow down. I should slow down. So it becomes from a lot of philosophies that we believe, but like that doesn't necessarily mean that we're living every day
the
Hinter way, which would be great.
It would be amazing.
And it's like nice anchor. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you say that. It's an anchor. Like sometimes if we are having a moment, one of us, and we're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, or there's just, parenthood, entrepreneurship, all of the stuff. Like sometimes one of us will remind the other, like, okay, think like Hinter, like let's just take a deep breath, slow down. Maybe we need some time away. Maybe we need some time in nature. And I think, it's a good reminder.
Yeah, we should be more of our guests sort of thing, Like sometimes we should actually get a text that says like, listen to this playlist. Nice evening. It's like,
that's I love that question, Will.
Of course. So I always find it an interesting way because, right, like everyone's talking about usually like find your avatar. What's your avatar look like? Well, I always tell people a lot of the time your avatar is usually a reflection of you in some shape or form. I think about, like when we created recreation rentals, right? Like I'm not the most recreational guy, but I do love being outside and connecting with people. Like I go on skiing trips with my friends. I don't ski at all. I just like to hang out with them and be in the cabin and be shopping when they're up in the mountains or doing whatever, but I'm still being a little bit more recreational. And that's kind of like what we want our travelers to feel the experience, right? Like if they can come here to go ski, they can go shopping, they can do whatever and still have the comfort, to do what they want. And so it was like, there's always like a little piece of it. But I would love to go back into your guys's kind of artist curation because I think it's super unique and I haven't seen this translated from the hotel world to the hospitality or alternative accommodation sector. I don't know, really like, I don't want to call you guys short-term rental operators because I feel like you're way more than that, but you're not like full landscape hotel fully yet-ish. I know like it's kind of like a weird in between, but for you guys, you have this residency program or you're working with artists to create more art for not only the properties, but they're going to be able to do this more often. Can you maybe talk about this program and show some light? Because again, I've heard about this in hotels. A good hotel example would be like the Jupiter in Portland, Oregon. They've done this with a lot of the local artists and people there, but would love to hear how you guys are doing it, how you're structuring it.
I think it, first and foremost, comes again from culture and a lot of like how Hinter started is like what we were talking about before. How do you tell the stories of other people? There's a lot of storytelling in Hinter, and I think we're very passionate about that. And there's a lot of factors coming into Hinter into how do you create a brand that also supports others, supports the environment on the sustainability side, but also how do you support communities? And the nice thing is that when you create a brand, you all of a sudden have a megaphone and it's up to you how you want to use it to either, and that actually becomes also increases like your brand strength. Like, and in Hinter's case, it's working with artists. And it's a challenge too, though, because for large hotels to do residencies, it's tiny bit easier because you have like an X amount of rooms that you can actually just like leverage your vacancy and do it. Like with us, we have 5 keys. We're small. We're very small. So like the moment that we want to actually work on a residency, we want to be picky, but also at the same time, it's so deeply rooted in our values to, hey, we did Hinter because of this. And because we want to be a brand that tells the story of an artist, puts an artist in there, like turn the spaces into showrooms. And at the end of the day, like it does help the artist, but also it does help Hinter because you're building what we were talking about before, culture. And then all of a sudden people are interested about like, hey, like I want to stay at one of these places because it's different. They're talking with artists, they're working with artists, that their art is displayed in the houses.
It's not just 4 walls that I'm staying in. It's a world.
And it's interesting too, though, because a lot of going back, especially in the West again, we try to make everything as optimal as possible when it comes to costs and profitability. We're obsessed with that. We're the culture that like the more profit, the better the margins, the better it is. And sometimes, and I mean, like a lot of other cultures realize that that is not the case, that sometimes you just do things because they feel better, that you can actually give a better product or experience. So like for the furniture, a lot of people are just like, hey, let's just go optimize and go as cheap as possible. Of course, get it at commercial grade, but let's go with like everything's cost, right? And you lose soul when you try to do that, right? So I think that's kind of also just the way that...
And there's a way to do both, to have soul, but also eliminate costs. Because what we've done, for example, sometimes with certain artists, you know, there could be a couch or a lamp or a rug that's in our spaces, and they are not pieces that we are paying for to keep in our space. Perhaps they are put there as if it's a showroom, and they are put there because the brand or the curator believes in Hinter and says, okay, we're having all these people come in, seeing the piece, touching the piece, sometimes sitting on the piece, experiencing it. And therefore, this is great brand exposure for that other brand. So we believe that you can do both. You can have soul and meaning and intentionality behind it, but you can also not have such high costs. You don't have to go and buy everything and have the most, high-end pieces. And again, what comes first? Like you can't just start a brand and before it's out there, just expect that, someone is going to say, yeah, here, take all my furniture and just leave it there. We had something behind what we've already had done, and we had kind of proof, like, listen, this is how many people we bring a month. This is how many people are asking about, the sheets or the couch, whatever. So I think that it's really important to maximize on that and benefit from that, and then you can have it all.
No, I love it. And going back to the anchor piece, right? Like, I love how you guys have an anchor, not only for yourselves, but I feel like the brand Hinter itself now has an anchor where you guys have been able to put, like, Emily, I think the way you said it, not to do it all at the same time or all at once, right? Like, it's going to happen over time, but it sounds like the art and minimalism in the space and keeping distractions free, but focusing on a few core pieces has allowed you guys to really be anchored in. And Mauricio, what you were saying really kind of brought up a quote from Horst Schulze, the co-founder of Ritz-Carlton, where he talked about, like, anytime you cut costs is when you take something away from the guests. And, it impacts the experience and impacts a feeling and impacts a certain sense, right? Like, it could be a sense of smell, a sense of touch, a sense of sight. And at the end of the day, you don't have to cut costs when you could just optimize for the experience you want to create. And whether it's using a local artist or whatever it may be, like, you can fill in that space where you would technically have cut, but actually make it more unique.
And I think like a little nice trick that we figured out, and Emily quickly mentioned it, is that a lot of the things that sometimes we feature there, they're collaborations with artists, because you are creating a channel of exposure for the artist. So you're creating win-win situations. So sometimes we do cut costs, but not at the expense of like the guest, you know, like if anything, we're enhancing the experience of the guest. And that works we've gone far down the road on this one, but like with furniture, with lamps, with our body care products, we do partnerships, because at the end of the day, and I think that is like a very important piece of this conversation, that brand is everything, because the moment that you create a brand, other brands want to collaborate with you, because you're bringing attention, you're bringing value to other brands. So with body and care, we will get them at wholesale. Sometimes they will just like, brands will reach out and say, hey, do you want our body and care for free? Because we would love to have them at Hinter spaces. So you're creating like, what's the world? Maybe it's not a community, but just like a circle of trust, or a hub of collaboration hub, maybe, of like brands collaborating with each other and being out there and like being put in front of guests. So it's like, it's super interesting on that end.
Exactly. It's like what I was saying about like, you can have it all in a sense. It sounds like cheesy, but it's true. Like you can have the soul that your brand needs and that you want to show your guests and give them the quality, but you can also not spend crazy amounts of money. And on top of it, third thing you're doing is you're helping often smaller businesses
100%,
who are or equally as small as we're also small, you know, small businesses who are trying to get the word out there and exposure, and people get to experience those things.
It's like, I'll continue with like example of a brand that starts doing cabins next to a lake, which is very famous for like fishing, and probably not the best example because I don't know much about fishing. But like all of a sudden you can remember that we were talking about like partnering up with like people that have been doing it for 20, 30 years and telling like their story and like where they want to fish. But also then like it's so easy to reach out for brands that manufacture, I don't know, fishing rods or like whatever gear is related to fishing. And then they see what you're doing with your guests and brands. 100%, if you're doing it like right, they'll give you the products at wholesale, or like they will say, hey, I just want 4 epic fishing rods because this is a story that I'm telling. Okay, here it goes for free, because you're going to be talking about them, you know. And then you can do that with a surf shack, you know, like another place, like find like a dude that it's not even manufacturing, like doing boards by hand, and collaborate with that guy and provide that experience to your guest. So there's a lot of brand collaboration with like different, like everyone's an artist like, in their own way, like whatever they're doing, everyone's an artist. So like collaborate with those artists to build your brand.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I think I could talk to you guys for probably another hour, 2, maybe 3. But I think this is a great conversation to kind of start wrapping up on, because I think specifically from my perspective is that brand and creating something beyond just a logo or a name is super, super lacking in hospitality. I think you have a lot of the big names, right? Like you have Marriott and Hilton and all those other brands, but we haven't really seen, outside of, you know, Vacasa and Sonder trying to go public and not doing the best at it. But like outside of those, we haven't really seen a true hospitality brand come out to life. And I think you guys are a great example of what could be done for current operators today that are new, that are wanting to grow, that are excited about having a piece of themselves, yet not being like, Emily, you were saying, like Hinter is a part of you, but it's not like the chatty part. It's the more earthy and this. And like, I think it's just super unique on how people can actually frame up the brand that they want to build. And so thank you guys for being such a great example, because I think there's a lot we could learn from what you guys have done. So I really appreciate you guys sharing all of that.
Thanks for the kind words, Bill.
Yeah,
I think Hinter is way better than us.
Our best qualities put together.
And
like our daughter.
And Hinter doesn't.
There you go. It's just Hinter is just becoming like Olive, right? It's going to be the best of the best.
She's even
so
better.
Good.
Here, but yeah.
Well, I always like to ask a question with all my guests on kind of for this listener's sake. Where's the best place that anyone can go to connect with you, to learn more, to reach out in any shape or form that you guys prefer? Where would you want them to go?
I mean, I would say like a good consolidated spot is just our main Instagram account, which is Hinter Company.
Awesome.
We both check it. We'll both see it. But of course, I mean, they could reach out to either of us on basically any channel if ever. But I think Hinter is the best way, because it's just kind of, we're both there. So just come say hi. we're
both there with little pieces of you in the brand. Just
exactly.
I love it. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me while in Spain and taking some time off. I'm hoping you guys get some much needed rest.
Thank you.
For the Slick Talk listeners, make sure you like and subscribe to all things Hinter House or Hinter in general, and grab those links in the show notes, show them some love. And of course, like always, we'll see you guys again next week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.